session, and the first item on the agenda is an anticipated executive session. Is there a proposed motion?
There is.
I move to find that premature public knowledge regarding a contract and labor relations agreement with employees would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage, and further move that we enter executive session to discuss a contract and labor relations agreement with employees under Title I, Sections 13A, 1A, and B, and invite Town Manager Eric Wells to join both discussions.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There are no nays. We are going into executive session. It's scheduled for 20 minutes. So we're going to come back into session earlier than we expected. So we are back from executive session. No substantive decisions were made. Next on the agenda would be the minutes from August 18, 2026. Is there a motion?
Move to approve, subject to modification.
Is there a second?
A second.
Going through page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. I'm not going to go through the Code of Ethics attachment, which runs a number of pages. Hearing no modifications, all those in favor of accepting the minutes as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
There are no nays, the motion carries. Next is public comment. This would be a moment for people here or participating online to make a public comment to the board. And try to keep your time to 2 or 3 minutes. It can be about anything, whether it's on the agenda or not. If it is something that's going to be coming up on the agenda, you may want to wait, but you don't have to. So let me ask, is there anybody in the room that wants to make a public comment?
Just a quick one.
Sure.
Don't worry, it's not that form, I mean, I'll say, for a lot of times people talk about the police department. how
You know what, I'm just like, they can't hear you on Zoom.
All right.
And just introduce yourself, please.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Sorry.
All right. So usually in every meeting, the beginning, people talk about the police and speeding and that kind of stuff. And I've had great success with the Williston Police Department. I've given them permission to park in my driveway and park in our farm barnyard driveway area. And they've been doing a phenomenal job. They've been getting people left right, and they're not getting people like a couple miles over the speed limit. They're over 10 miles usually over the speed limit. They usually pull them over, but they've been doing a great job. But I do get some backlash from people like, why do you let them park in your driveway? And I said, it's because they're catching speeders. Well, that's not cool. And well, yes, it is cool. So I guess the thing is, people don't want people speeding through their developments and stuff, but it's okay when they're on Mountain View Road. Let's do 100 miles per hour. And you get the people flicking their lights and warning them that the police are up ahead. And really, it's such a terrible thing to do. It's like, let them do their job. And they're not catching people a couple miles over the speed limit. It's 10 miles or more typically. And they've been doing a great job. They've been pulling people over left and right. And the speeding on Mountain View Road has definitely gone down a lot. You can tell people are going by, they're doing the speed limit now. But yeah, definitely letting them park in the driveway, letting them have that opportunity, because people are predictable. They know where they're going to be, so they're someplace different, and they're pulling them over. But they've been doing a great job. I really do appreciate everything that they've done, and I just really like, and you have to work with them. Obviously, you have to give them the permission to park in your driveway. But people need to stop warning them. Hey, there's a cop up ahead. You don't want them speeding through your neighborhood. Well, I don't want them speeding down my road either. So let's put the cards on the table and let's just get it done. Let them do their job. Let them catch the speeders and get it under control. So that's it. They've been doing a great job. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
As long as they don't catch me.
Anyone
You
else?
just told them where they were going to be, Dave.
Anyone
My
else?
sister did notice, and she goes, oh, damn, they almost got me.
Only takes once. Anyone else in the room? Anybody online?
Got 3 online. I'll go first to Isham. I'm guessing that's Mike. Hey, Mike, hold on just a second. Hey, Mike. Yep,
Michael.
we got you.
I don't know if you can see me or not.
No, but we can hear you.
Hear me, but I'm not sure. The camera's on.
Oh, we just do audio for public comment.
Oh, so,
Well, thank you, Dave Martell. I appreciate, those comments that the police, they do make a big difference when they're out. So I am Mike Isham, the chair town please place rural road safety on the next available select board agenda. Direct staff to return with a written implementation plan, identifying some immediate measures, some longer-term recommendations, responsible departments, and some target dates. We have completed the discussion stage. We now would like an action plan and timeline. Also include the completion of the safety audit and buttering up the St. George Town Law in Plainview. And I think there might be someone else willing to speak tonight from our Rural Road Safety Committee.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
Other people online?
Yep, I'll go Terry Zidrich. I'll connect you next here, just a second.
So I assume you can hear me?
Yes. Hi, Terry.
Hi, Terry Zidrich. So I'm part of Mike Isham's Rural Road Safety Committee, as well as part of Kevin Babson's Williston on the Move group, and we do some similar things. But I'm here to, I guess, second, I'll be short, I'll second Mike's request. We had a great meeting with Eric, the new police chief, and Christine, the public works director, replacing Bruce. We discussed a whole bunch of things, and many of the things that could be done to help with traffic calming in the various rural roads, including additional police enforcement for the traffic laws, signage, and various road modifications. And of course, we'd be looking for things that start. But we'd really like to get a firm comeback date scheduled. We requested something in September. I know 2 weeks is a pretty tall order, so I'm not sure I expected anything today, but it would be great to have something scheduled in the future. So we at least hear what's going to be done in evaluating the request of Mike's group. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric, anybody else?
Yep, go one more. And Cindy Hines. Cindy, I'm going to connect you right now.
Cindy?
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you.
Okay, so I'm also part of Mike's group, and my name is Cindy Hines, and I live on South Road. Williston's rural roads are also residential neighborhoods. People live, walk their dogs, bike, retrieve their mail, visit neighbors, operate farm equipment, and put children on school buses along these roads. The police chief reported that motorists traveling approximately 10 miles per hour over the coast of limit received warnings. That's great, but a warning is. And while a warning is enforcement, it also demonstrates why enforcement alone will not lower everyday operating speed. Our rural roads are being driven like highways, but they were not built like highways and do not confuse them. I have lived on South Road close to 30 years. Most days I drive to the bike path walking and I feel unsafe walking on my road. Please schedule a rural road safety or formal selective board action, including an evaluation of how we can lower speed limits and make permanent measures that will reduce lower speed on our rural roads. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Nope, no more public comment.
That would bring us to the Allen Brook Bridge project update and review. Good evening, David.
His hat off. Very
Yeah.
official.
Whoa.
I got a new hat. I'm excited.
That's planning.
Good evening, Select Board. I'm Senior Conservation Planner David Maroney. I'm going to provide an update for you on the Allen Brook Boardwalk Repair Project. I am the third conservation planner to work on this project for the town, and I am pleased to report that we have an opportunity to fix this bridge and get it open safely with a targeted opening date in fall 2026. And that's currently going to cost us an additional $25,000 that we're looking for, in addition to the funds that we've currently allocated and been able to prioritize for this project, which will put the sort of total project costs to date after the inclusion of this repair at about $125,000. The Allenbrook Nature Trail Boardwalk is a very interesting piece of infrastructure in our town. So I am the conservation planner in the Planning and Zoning Department. This isn't the Recs Department, not Public Works. The Planning and Zoning Department typically oversees our country parks, our primitive trail network. And this structure is a bit of a hybrid. It connects some really critical community institutions in the village on the west side of the Allen Brook. It's Village Community Park, Williston Central School, and the library, to a whole host of residential neighborhoods on the east side, and this Allen Brook Nature Trail. So it's a very unique piece of infrastructure, and I'll walk you through this update, but I also put a bit of context for kind of the history and background about what this structure is all about, kind of how it came to be what it is, because it also tells us a piece of why it took a while to fix this structure, why it was vulnerable in the first place, and kind of what we'll need to make it more robust and resilient in the long term. The structure has been out of service since very early 2024. You may recall there was a major December 2023 flood that affected us here in Williston, in addition to other parts of our regional area, and then followed by a major statewide flood in July 2024. And at the same time, the Allen Brook, right around this bridge, was experiencing some pretty big hydrological changes because of a beaver dam and pond that was in there. So there's been a lot of change and upheaval in this part of the stream, which ended up damaging this structure and put us in the predicament that we're in. One other piece that I'll highlight is that due to another last-minute change in the conditions of the stream, there is a component of this project that we're not able to move forward with at this time. There's a resiliency component of the project that was designed to armor a portion of the bank and protect a portion of the structure that is not currently damaged and was not slated for further repair or upgrades. So I'll talk a little bit about what's coming down the line, because we know that because of the location of the structure and because of its history, it will need more attention over time, and it will need a second phase of investment to make it more resilient in the long run. So I'll start with just a couple bullet points on this. I know I've got a little bit of time, but I want to be concise and efficient here. So this structure dates back to 1995. So it actually predates most of the residential neighborhoods that it now connects. And so when it was put in, it was a nature trail. It was a collaboration between the town, Williston Central School, and the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps. And so it's this isolated feature on the other side of the bank where school kids could go and do nature learning projects, and community members could go and walk. So the first generation of this bridge was just a rustic wooden structure, and it lasted about 10 years before it was replaced. And so over time, we've now replaced this structure twice. The second generation lasted about 20 years, and then we renovated it in 2022. But it wasn't until the 2010s, so 20 years after the structure first went in, that this trail network was extended, and it created this door-to-door service that people came to rely on to send their kids to school, to walk to the park, to walk to the library. And so over its most recent 10 years, it really turned into this community service that people came to rely on. And that's why it became so disruptive when we had to close this thing down. And ultimately, community members were continuing to use the structure. And you may recall last December, we made the decision to remove a section of that bridge as it was failing to prevent unsafe crossings. So one other piece of the history which is important, I think, for you to know is that when this structure was first replaced in 2005 and 2008, after that first wooden boardwalk rotted out, it was still just a nature trail, and it was upgraded. But at the time, no one was really looking 20 years into the future and imagining, this stream is going to be, could have the potential to change dramatically. And so the upgrade, which was a pragmatic decision that fit the times, was to replace the wooden supports with galvanized metal poles that went several feet down into the surface layer of the floodplain. And so fast forward 20 years, the natural meanderings and changes in the stream started to cut close to that structure, and all of these hydrological events created a new channel in the stream which eroded away that surface layer, and we found that this structure is actually highly vulnerable to flooding because those supports only go down a few feet and they don't go below the scour level where the stream bank is. And so when that erosion occurred, and you can see a picture of this that was in the memo that shows a little bit of its condition over April 2025, you can see that those structures were really exposed almost down to their base, and some of them fell away entirely. So the solution, which we first started to implement in 2022, was to replace these poles with what are called helical piles, and these are engineered structural supports which go about 16 feet down below the scour line, and so they are engineered to be able to support a structure like this. Now, in 2022, during our most recent renovation, we replaced all of the decking. We replaced some of the structural components that needed to be replaced, and we replaced a section of these supports with these helical piles around the primary stream crossing, because that was the area that was deemed vulnerable. And this was just another 2 years later, in 2023, that we got this secondary channel that really damaged the structure. So when the town started to work on coming up with a repair solution for this in early 2024, the goal was twofold. It was to fix it and get it back in service, but also to do it in a way that will make the structure more resilient and prevent another situation. And so what the engineering team that we worked with came up with was a plan that was going to use more of these helical piles, actually a more robust, larger caliber of pile that would be machine driven. So bring down a small excavator into the floodplain, drive these helical piles down 16 feet below that scour line where the stream bed is, and that means that they will be resistant to further scour. They'll be able to support this structure through future changes in the hydrology of the situation. However, the rest of the structure that's undamaged would also be vulnerable to future changes, and so the second resilience component of this project was to armor a portion of the stream bank to keep it from cutting underneath the structure and eroding more of those 2005 vintage supports that are still.
Looking at here.
That is what we're looking at there, yeah. So that was the original design, and I started working on this project shortly after I started with the town last summer, in early summer 2025. And at that stage, the beaver dam that had been there had just broken during the spring thaw. And what we found is when we went out back there, even just 1 year later, stream conditions were already very different from erosion. And so the design that had been made a preliminary design in early 2024 was obsolete. It had to be updated, redesigned, it expanded in scope, and the permitting jumped a major increment in threshold. So it took us about 1 year to get through permitting. This project is fully permitted as of June 26. It has an individual wetlands permit, which is the highest level. That triggered an Act 250 amendment for this project. So this was reviewed by about 6 different divisions of the Agency of Natural Resources, as well as the Stream Engineering Division of DEC. We also have a federal U.S. Army Corps of Wetlands permit. So it turned into quite a undertaking, but we got those permits completed and then spent July bringing on board contractors to work with. We had to bid out a portion of this project to bring on an excavator, and we were preparing to begin this work at the end of August. A final twist occurred which caused us to really separate this into 2 phases, and that was when we got out there just mid-August with the contractors to take a fresh look and finalize the plan for implementation. found that yet again, in the years since these designs were submitted for permitting and implementation, more erosion had occurred. So we now need more fill to go do the resilience part of the plan, which would require another amendment of our permit, a 30-day notice period. And when I put all that together, there really would have been no feasible way we could have completed that project this season within the narrow permit window that we had to work on this. So the good news is that the two components of the project were designed to be independent. The repair solution and those helical piles were designed to support this structure safely and get it opened again. And so we have an opportunity to go fix this. That's my strong recommendation to do that, because every season that we leave this thing disconnected, it's very vulnerable to another major flood event while it's two fragments that are in the floodplain. And it extends the period in which we have a discontinuity of services and increased safety and liability concerns associated with this derelict structure. So the work is, I have a table of costs at the end of this memo that you can take a look at. We have spent about $44,000 to date. You can see that a good chunk of that was on everything that went into permitting and redesign, the structural engineering and civil engineering pieces, the wetland scientists that we had to bring on board to complete our individual wetlands permit, and then a smaller subset of costs associated with the preliminary consultations that we received and design work therein. And the remaining costs are the direct repair costs, which are valued about around $50,000. The final repair consultation, construction support services, which is essentially scaled down from what was going to be the stream excavation portion of that project. Our excavation contractor is still going to go in there. We need him to create the access path for equipment and do all of the erosion control pieces and get equipment down into that stream appropriately so that we can drive those heavier piles in to support the structure. And then some costs for engineering oversight for that construction. A couple of things I want to highlight. So our window to work in streams, according to our permit conditions, closes on October 1st, because that's what they consider the end of the low flow season, and after that water levels tend to rise. It becomes more difficult to work in streams, and stream projects are more prone to sediment washing downstream and things like that. So that's where the state has a cutoff that has been included with our permit conditions. And our next opportunity after that does not open again until June of next year, so almost 8 months from now. And so it will not make sense to pursue any changes in our permits, because we know in 8 months, conditions are going to change again in the stream. That's been one of the through themes of this project and what's made it challenging. You design it, you permit it, you go back out there, and it's changed, and you have to do it again. So what staff proposes to do is reassess the conditions in April 27 and reconvene with the engineering team to bring a menu of options to the select board, taking a slight step back as to what are all the options we have and what makes the most sense at this stage, knowing that we're going to need some additional investment in the structure to make it more resilient in the long run. And what's just the best way to do that, given that we're at this juncture where we have to we're kind of forced in some ways to do some reevaluation. One other thing to know, there is a downside in splitting this into 2 segments. There is some redundancy in some of the work that we have to pay for. We have to pay for contractors simply to mobilize their equipment to the site, to prepare a site with erosion control measures and all of that. And then to demobilize and reseed the areas that were disturbed and naturalize the site appropriately. So there is about $10,000 of redundant costs that we'd have to pay again to go do any future segment of work. However, my recommendation is still that we take this opportunity that we have to go get the work done that we can get done, that we're permitted to get done, knowing that if we were to put this off, further erosion damage could easily exceed $10,000, and we can't control what happens in that stream, but if we get this thing fixed, that whole structure benefits from being reconnected with these upgraded supports. So that's the situation. So really, we're not looking for a formal motion at this time, is my understanding from Eric, but we're looking for to answer any questions that the select board might have, and to really get your approval or buy-in to move forward with this. And then staff can, planning staff will work with the manager's office, the director of finance, to see what available pools of funding we have that can reprioritize $25,000 out of to complete the project at this time.
Questions for you?
So you're assuming the project proceeds and finishes up before this October 1st hard deadline. You're anticipating the bridge would be opened like November, October? I mean, I don't know.
So, I think, I don't want to give an exact date, but essentially there's some components that have to happen within that October 1st window. It's anything that involves machinery in the stream. So removing all the old damaged supports, putting in those new supports, and then framing those in. And then after we've met that criterion, there's a little more breathing room. So it could be another, 2 weeks after that, 3 weeks after that, whatever. But the contractor who's repairing the structure then has to redeck it and do the finishing work to get it open.
Okay. But so the stream work, or the work.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
work is done. Okay.
That's
so,
what's
but either way, you're anticipating it will be, before the hard winter.
That's
usable and, okay.
Yeah, that would be the tentative, that's the goal, and that's my.
I want to hold you 100%
There's been a lot
to it, David.
There's been a lot of twists and turns in this project, and every time I get too optimistic, something else floods or erodes or implodes with permitting. So I try not to make too many promises here, but I do feel optimistic that we have that opportunity in front of us to get this thing reopened to the community in this fall.
So the bridge will be usable without the stream armoring,
Yes.
but it's vulnerable to another event on the ends.
Yes, well, it's vulnerable to another event on the ends, in the center, in between the two portions of it that will have now been upgraded. So I think, I don't want to make too many projections, but I've talked to the engineers just about some of their ideas, and depending on what happens out there in the stream, there is, in fact, what we now believe is another beaver dam that's being built as we speak, farther downstream, so the water level is rising. So that could change things again. It will, right? That we know this is a low gradient stream that meanders quite a bit. It's going to change over the years, and so we just need to think about what's the smartest investment that the town can do to improve the resilience. So that could change things again as what it has become, which is a major pedestrian thoroughfare and not just a rustic recreation trail that, if it's out, too bad. Instead, it's something that the community has really felt the discontinuity of because of the way that they came to rely on it over the last 10 years.
Yeah, I agree. It was a major destination for me with my kids. Would go there and watch the beavers in the pond, or just, go into the nature area across the bridge. So it's really important for the community. And also, it's a safety issue as well, because people are still crossing that stream, even with the bridge down. So it's something I think we should definitely move forward with.
Yeah, I get a lot of comments about when is it going to be reopened. So, I did go down and look at it about a week ago, and somebody had defaced the bridge closed, do not enter type sign with bad comments about our rec department. And I didn't want to be all municipal nerd, being like, it's not the rec.
You couldn't spell your last name, so we could.
does sound like we have consensus.
Yeah. Can you just remind us quickly about the funding structure for the original project and how we funded that?
Yeah, I believe we took mostly ARPA funds were invested in this project, and with some that we had in our conservation projects fund. That's not right, Dave. That's not my.
Yeah, I don't know all the details, but at some point there was about $14,000 of ARPA money that I think was used to pay for the initial consultations. In November of 2024 was the most significant funding package. The select board approved, I think it was either $45,000 or $50,000 from of ARPA funds from the Community Projects Fund. So when that went through, that allowed the town to hire Engineering Ventures for the formal design steps of the project, and on a $14,000 contract, I think, to do that work. And so that's really when things kind of kicked off. But yeah, by the time they got out there the next spring, when I was on staff, that initial preliminary work was really no longer viable. So we also then, more recently, were able to reprioritize some leftover funds, community projects funds from other projects, in consultation with the Director of Finance, to bring us to the current, what we've been able to spend.
So where do we think the 24.8 is going to come from?
We're going to do some looking at the staff level, see if we can ID some sources of funds. If we need a formal motion, if it's our recommendation becomes fund balance or some other source that you would need approval to, we'd bring that back to you. But in the interim, we'd like to look and see if we can ID. Want to get your consensus before moving forward. If there was a sense like, hey, you don't want to proceed, this would be the moment to do that. Want to be transparent. But Dave had found the team the last few months.
We do have, I talked to both of our contractors today, and we have a tentative start date for the week of September 14th. So it's pretty tight timeline.
Yeah, no, I would love to see us reprioritize rather than dip into fund balance, but it's early in the year, maybe we can find a little bit of squeeze somewhere, but yes, I definitely think we need to keep moving with the project.
The community wants this bridge reopened and wants this, accessibility point. And this is a priority, walkability, bikeability, so.
Great.
Super quick.
Super. Is there any possibility to ask the HOA that's on the other side of the bridge to potentially add funding, as their houses have the highest net gain by this past bridge being open?
I can think of no legal mechanism by which we could do that or enforce it. So the answer is yes, we could ask, but I don't know it'd be worth the time to even try. So it sounds like we do have consensus.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, members of the Select Board.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Just want to publicly thank David for all his work on this.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
As he's outlined in this memo.
Who knew that
all
this
the
would
pieces
be
that go into
turned into
this.
such a big, long project for you?
Expert in Act 250, though.
Yeah.
No promises. Yeah, now I'm a permitting expert.
Thanks, David.
So next on the agenda, impact fee studies and capital planning. Good evening, Matt. Good evening.
So we made some slides too today. Yeah. Got to have slides. So we're going to outline to the select board this evening, kind of refresh a little bit about impact fees and what those are and how the town can levy those. And a couple thoughts for potential impact fee studies to look at some larger projects that we've been talking about here the last several months. There's no decision point on whether to proceed or not. Just trying to get your feedback on should we think about doing this. And we're going to be doing a recreation impact fee update study. So there might be an opportunity to expand the scope of the consultant with these other ones we'll outline to you. We need ID. We need to get a better cost picture, but there's some funding sources available should you want to do it. But and then just briefly with impact fees, to levy one, the process is you have to study it first, see what could be able to be assessed, and ultimately impact fees live in the zoning bylaw, so there's a zoning bylaw process there as well. these slides up, and our plan director, Matt Belanger, is going to kick things off here with just talking about what impact fees are.
Sure.
I'll get this going. Let's see. There we go. Always forget how to make it big. We'll talk about the structure and then a couple concepts and then possible next steps.
Sure. Great. So, yeah, I've kind of been brought to give you a little bit of the 101. And as most of you know, Williston has a fairly lengthy history of assessing impact fees to new development, continues to do so today for both transportation and recreation. Municipalities assess impact fees so that new development coming in pays its fair share of increased facilities that it creates a demand for. So when more development comes in and you need more transportation system capacity, the intent here is that the new capacity that's needed is paid for by the new development and not entirely subsidized by folks who are already here. And so you're looking for that concurrency between the demand for service that's created and what's being paid. So there are some constitutional tests because this is quite literally a taking. You want a permit and we take money from you to go build stuff and needs to meet some constitutional tests. The first one is proportionality. This is why you do a study. You need to predict how much demand for new service or new facility infrastructure that new development is going to create. So our two existing impact fees are sort of underpinned by studies that say we predict this much more development coming in. We want to provide this level of service for X piece of infrastructure, for example, our transportation system. We have projects planned that we have some kind of idea what they're going to cost, and we have some kind of idea of how much demand for service they're going to be able to meet. So we know if we get, I'll make it really simple, 100 more houses, we need another turning lane at a certain intersection. And we say, okay, the cost of that turning lane, we wouldn't have to build it if the 100 houses weren't coming. They are. We need to apportion, or we want to apportion the cost of that on a per house basis. When we do transportation, we look at vehicle trips created, but it's the same idea. So we need to stay roughly proportional, make sure that it's not an outrageous fee or a symbolically small one, but actually relates to funding the meeting of that demand for new facilities. We can't use impact fees to fix an existing deficiency. So if we've let a lot of growth happen and we haven't kept up with it and something is operating in an unsatisfactory manner, it's the responsibility of everybody who's here already to work together to address that. It would be unfair to place that burden on new development. It's already a problem. It can't cover operating, maintenance, or personnel costs. So sometimes when new development comes to town, you say, well, we're going to need a new police officer or firefighter or town planning staff member. You can't pay for those things with impact fees. You can pay for durable equipment. So in South Burlington, for example, with their emergency services, it went down to radios and bulletproof vests and things that last more than 5 years, for example. But it can't cover your operating and maintenance costs. You have to take that revenue, keep it in a separate account, and you have to be responsible for being able to show that you've actually paid it to projects that expand facilities that are meeting that demand for service. So, and there needs to be some connection between the development that's happening and the fee being paid. So there's a nexus and a proportionality to it. So that's why you do a study, because what you need to do if you want to try to capture an impact fee from new development is you need to know what is the level of service you're trying to provide? In our recreation impact fee, one of the ways we talk about it is just acres of parkland per person, and there are accepted national standards of, a range of what you want to provide. So you need to know what level of service you're trying to provide. You need to have some kind of a prediction of how much development is coming, and you need to know what level of service you're currently providing and what you need to build in order to keep up. So that's what an impact fee study does at a very simple level.
Matt, the existing deficiency thing must be a kind of percentage kind of thing.
It is.
Yeah.
So, for example,
I was going to use the school as an example, right? When they
Sure.
built Allen Brook, they offloaded an overcrowded Williston Central School into that building, so they couldn't charge the whole thing to
Right.
fees. But if there's an extra 100 kids coming in, 1/3 of it or something like that. Numbers off the top of my head, but yeah,
Right.
so it's the same thing when we talk, if we talk about the library. It's already deficient, but this would make it worse, so it might be a percentage.
Yep, so you have to come up with some kind of rational calculation for that. Also, sometimes the facility you want to build is actually going to buy you more capacity than you're predicting that you need. And that was the case for the rec fee study in Allenbrook Park. It said we want to build, one Allenbrook Park, and we need about half of an Allenbrook Park to get us to 2025, which was the original horizon of the fee. It's also going to create capacity beyond that. So we can't charge who comes from 2015 to 2025 for the part of the facility that's going to serve the folks who come after 2025. We can do a new study, and we can keep charging going forward. But again, you're trying to keep that proportionality working, because projects and capacity don't come in perfect, 10 years of growth chunks. So your fee study looks at that and looks at, your percentages of what's happening. You also want to be realistic about what your project list is, and is it likely to be achievable during the life of the fee. So there was a time way back in the day when Williston's transportation impact fee included a line item for rebuild exit 12, a project which the town was not going to pay any town funds for, and which was also, I think at the time, $22 million on the list. And that was kind of problematic to have there, because I guess the state would probably take our money if we gave it to them for that, but wasn't likely to be the way it would go. So identify a level of service, identify the projects that will cause you to continue to have that level of service against the new development that you've predicted is going to come in over the life of the fee. What you end up getting out of an impact fee study is a statement that says the maximum fee you can justify charging is this. And it even goes down to each individual year, because you have to account for the way property taxes are otherwise being paid pre and post development for projects and things like that. So that's why you see some of the numbers that go down to the dollars and cents in the Williston fees, because they do change as you go across the lifetime of the fee. So there's lots of kinds of new infrastructure, lots of kinds of levels of service to its citizens, visitors, shoppers, and workers that the town of Williston has taken on the responsibility for. We charge impact fees for some of them, transportation and recreation. We don't necessarily capture revenue to keep up with infrastructure in some other ways, and that's kind of what we're here to talk about a little more tonight.
This one's still.
Yeah, I sort of mentioned there's some dollars and cents here. These are just the current fees we charge. The point I would make here is that historically, the out-the-door impact fees in Williston were much higher, because we had school impact fees for both a portion of the expansion of CVU and the construction of the Allenbrook School. When those debts were retired, those fees went away. Those were much larger. It was not uncommon when I was first here in Williston for someone to write a permit fee check, with their permit fees and all their impact fees and everything else, around $16,000 or $17,000 to build a house. So we've come down from that quite a bit.
So next, we'll look at a couple exploration concepts, we're calling them, to potentially study should the select board want to have that work done. So this picture is our pump station over on River Cove Road. So we want to talk about a wastewater
Cute
project.
little affordable house.
Yeah. Got a big generator there, so we need it. We need it. So we shared earlier this year, we had a wastewater systems analysis completed as part of a tax increment financing overall feasibility study. We found, we knew there were several projects we need to do to the system regardless, and this one that we flag here is our most critical piece of town infrastructure. This is our 300-foot force main that goes underneath the Winooski River to the Essex Junction plant. This carries all the wastewater in town to the treatment plant. It all goes through that one pipe ultimately. This is a 10-inch in diameter pipe, operates at 1,500 gallons per minute. Think of this about the length of a football field or so. So what was described in that system upgrade with our engineering firm is there's a need to increase the pipe size to 14 inches as the town thinks about a longer term here about potential growth, especially in our designated growth center area, and also just the need for our sewer system overall. And thinking about that, this is a capital project that at the staff level we're thinking about looking how do we move forward with this potentially first, because everything working backwards in the system, you've got to have this project happen to have any other investment that you need down the line, the gravity lines, the pump stations, other force mains. It's trying to find a way, should the town want to move forward with this project to upsize that pipe under the river. So as you heard from our engineer earlier this summer, that's about a $2.9 million project in today's dollars. And also should know as we plan for that future growth, we're talking about grand list health for the town as well, and what that means, and how this wastewater infrastructure is critical to that type of sustainable growth pattern that we've been exploring in our town plan. So to give you a visual of where the pipe goes, and thanks to Christine, our director, for sharing a map of this today. I drew it with the yellow lines on a screenshot of Google Earth, but in the corner there's our pump station with the black arrow on River Cove Road. So everything's going to flow to that pump station. Then that yellow pipe is the force main that we're talking about that flows under the river, then it meanders up to the plant over in Essex Junction. Town of Williston, as part of the Tri-Town, owns just over a third of the treatment capacity in that plant with Essex Junction and the town of Essex. So that's the project, is to upsize that pipe. So the why, as I share, this is an essential project to complete to make any other wastewater projects worth doing. This is, if we separated this potentially from a tax increment financing structure, if the town were to look at that down the road, it separates it from that district, an increment you need from that district to be able to cover the debt service. You're removing a huge part of the equation for the infrastructure to make the district viable. So if we come up with a strategy to move this project forward, it's trying to think, how do we build that capital stack to make it viable from a project planning standpoint?
So if we pulled this out, would that make TIF more possible?
Potentially. We need to run the numbers some more, but it changes the equation significantly. I think that's fair to say that.
Yeah, it plays all the way back to when we talked about, what's the size of the first project need to be to fund the infrastructure. And so it shifts the balance of what you're funding in the TIF from a street and a lot of wastewater to a street and less wastewater.
But it's also shifting, the whole point of the TIF is to shift the cost of infrastructure from the developer to the town, or the taxes, I guess you'd say, over time. Now we're putting it back. If we do this, we're putting it back on, it's going to be a fee that the developer has to pay.
So this is our possible how, and how impact fees could play in. So the project, if the town bonded for it to start, you could pay a portion of that bond annually using revenue from an impact fee as its proportional share to the project, what that new development's fair share is to this infrastructure project. We'd also have to look at a proportionality of the existing wastewater system users through the rate structure to pay its proportional share, because all users are going to use that same pipe. And it's part of the evaluation and the math of this, just a high level thinking about this. There's also programs at the state level for grant and loan forgiveness, options for the town to pursue as well. On the water side of things, you might recall in Lamplight back in 2020, we did a major water line replacement there. It was a $2 million project, and the town got $1 million of loan forgiveness through that program. So there's also a similar program to look at for wastewater, need to be on a priority list, and they're all things to pursue and think about. We share with you our net position in the wastewater fund is over $4.3 million. Part of the thought is coming up with potential projects to look at utilizing some of those funds towards. This would be a project to think about, I wouldn't say use millions of dollars towards it, but you could, maybe $500,000, something to think about. So you could start to arrange this capital stack for the project from a few different sources here, and wondering if impact fees can play a role here to overall make this a viable project, potentially in the shorter term. I can't imagine how long it's going to take to get it permitted, as we heard from the project, but, these.
As long as there's no bats.
Yeah.
Put David on it, we'll get that done.
But if we learn from this study what an impact fee could look like, it's something you could think about implementing in the next year, even after.
Eric, I'm interested in why you say that just because everybody uses the pipe, everybody to pay for it, because if we stopped building right now, we wouldn't have to do this project at all. Kind of like the left river.
We know we're kind of at a peaking factor threshold with the current pipe, and that we'll need to do something, and maybe it's some other mitigating measures as opposed to the pipe, it's the second pumps and third pump, but yeah, that piece we'd have to flush out a little bit more, no pun intended.
It just lends itself.
It's right there.
Exactly.
I would say, let's just say the pipe is at 100% today. Okay, are we going to turn off all new development? Or are we going to try to, capture some of that increased burden more directly? So everybody does use the pipe. Everybody who uses the system benefits from this piece of infrastructure being, really solid and not sitting at 100 or over % capacity. But the nice thing about figuring out proportionality for an impact fee on something like this is you figure it out based on every new gallon that somebody is sending, and they're all predicting their new gallons per day when they're getting their permits. So like vehicle trips, you can basically look it up in a table and come up with something that's fair and has some basis in reality.
And part of it is projecting out, say we financed this with a bond to start, and we projected out our dwelling units that were coming online. We collect the impact fees when we think we'll pull those permits for those. So trying to predict year to year what our impact fee revenue is to the sewer fund, and then in turn using that revenue to pay that share of the debt year to year to reduce that burden on the ratepayers overall in the system. So we would kind of formulate all that out of what it would look like as part of a study.
This just seems like a clear and appropriate use of impact fees to this.
I'll toss it to Matt for the library discussion.
Oh, how did
Talk
you
about
get that, Matt?
We'll talk about the library a lot, so.
Well, I can just start this by saying, maybe the parallel here is a little closer to the recreation impact fee, but it's the same general concept. What is the level of service that the town has decided to provide to its current and future citizens? I would say probably with this project, some of what is proposed is to make up with a deficiency, and some of it is to build capacity for the future. Again, you do an impact fee study, you assign a percentage to that, and you have that desired level of service, you have the time frame of the fee, you have the amount of predicted new development. Just like the rec fee, you come up with a number, it gets billed on permits. This would probably, I have an interesting philosophical thing where I think about, could a fee like this be charged beyond new residential? I think the same way about recreation, because as we get into things like more urban parks that might be used by shoppers and office workers and others who might not necessarily live in Williston, libraries are sometimes similar, but it's a really safe place to just say, a new home generally creates X amount of demand, and that's the fraction that gets used when you're calculating the fee. So same basic idea as a recreation fee, if you were to look at a fee to fund some of a library project.
Yeah, and in a similar structure on the debt payment side, seeing what the town could assess, trying to then see what that would come with permits as they come in. It's not going to pay the whole bond, but what's the proportionality, and that becomes part of the overall revenue to the general fund to offset part of the debt service and other areas for it. We would understand what we could do by studying this as part of an overall, just how we're going to finance the project full picture should it proceed. Town of Shelburne recently adopted an impact fee like this. They finished their project several years ago. I learned through this the news that you could assess a fee to be paying down that debt because they had built that for future service demand. So Shelburne Selectboard had a similar discussion. They were looking at ways to assess impact fees to help with their debt on their balance sheet in different ways that would be appropriate. So that's
For their libraries?
yeah. So they've adopted an impact fee there that they're using the revenue to pay down that library bond. A part of it, not all of it. But they were trying to diversify their revenue sources beyond just taxation on their balance sheet.
Yeah, so the important point there, I think, is that you can look back at a project you've already done and study that and say, did this project create new capacity? And you can move forward with an impact fee on something like that. You don't have to establish the impact fee prior to building the project.
Kind of the next steps to think about as we're working our consultant lineup for the rec impact fee. If there's interest in the board in pursuing these other two fees as part of that study, we can get an idea of what that would look like. I would then come back with some proposals for how we would fund those portions of the project. For example, the wastewater, I'd probably recommend the wastewater net position for that. You can reimburse an impact fee study cost with fees that you collect in the future as well as an option there. I want to also mention we've talked about a public safety impact fee here as well. That's something I'd recommend we still look at in the future, but we don't have a project like we have with these two projects. We need to do some more capital future planning around public safety to be at a point to have that study. So don't want to lose sight of that, but that's the reason we don't have that this evening, and we're doing the rec fee, so this was an opportunity to look at these other ones as well.
Questions or comments from the board?
I guess my only thought, it's probably stupid, but the library seems like a weaker case. Maybe our consultant could do a back of the envelope to see if it's worth pursuing. That just seems like the deficiency is fairly large compared to the number of percentage of additional houses over the, I think Kevin was saying 20 years, it's like a 20-year plan now in the new building, so, I would just, before we full on spend 10 grand for this, come back and say, yeah, if you do this, you'll raise $5,000. Just to kind of back of the envelope to see what you think.
Yeah, we can certainly have that conversation with the prospective consultant.
The other one, I'm all in, but the library just feels like it could be such a small, that every dollar counts, but I don't want to spend more studying it than doing it.
I think, I agree. I think the wastewater is continually something that's on my mind, and development is not going to stop. We have aggressive targets for housing. We have a huge housing, obligation, not obligation, but a huge housing goal, and we need wastewater. We need this pump station to function at its peak always. It's really the integral cog. So, yeah. And I also like your idea to not spend the money. It's not going to, garner the money you need.
Find out how much Shelburne spent on their
Yeah, I should mention, one of the reasons we're thinking about this now is because impact fee studies involve a bunch of grand list work, because you can't double dip. So that piece of land that somewhere in the 10-year life of the fee is going to start paying an impact fee, it was paying property tax before it developed, and some small piece of that property tax was going towards capital projects, including the ones on your impact fee list. And after it builds, its taxes will go up, and some small fraction of that number will now go towards that piece of infrastructure as well. And so you have to make sure you're not charging, however few, it's usually like a couple of dollars, but you have to make sure that you're not also asking for that money in your impact fee. It literally gets down to saying, with a commercial building, like, are you a wood or steel construction building? We have to try to predict our tax revenue and work it out. And that's also why you see things like our recreation impact fee. Currently, we topped it out at $2,100 for a new single unit dwelling. The justified maximum price across the life of that fee was always at least a couple dollars more than that. And so when we worked with the Planning Commission and Select Board to establish that fee, we said, well, this is the highest fee you can safely charge in a whole dollar amount, and you can do it for the whole life of the fee. You're leaving, some pocket change on the table, essentially, but you're avoiding any kind of, lawsuit that your fee is unconstitutional.
It's that pesky takings clause.
Yeah, so if you can do that grand list work for a couple of fees that are all likely to happen in the same time period, you don't have to do it 3 times. That's why we might talk about co-locating some of the fee study work for more than one fee.
And also the rec, so it'll be 3 pieces of it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we've got Rex the baseline, and then we would add these other elements to it. And yeah, we're hoping to get going on this, this fall and try to get that feedback to you probably in the springtime. That's kind of in line with our capital budgeting coming up as well. And thinking about these. And wastewater too, we typically do that in May. So if we were at a point where we had a study and a potential fee, we could kind of be looking at this project with a little more funding thought behind it as we start thinking about more developing the project in different ways, what a timeline could be for that force main under the river.
So you have sufficient guidance from us?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll come back to you with a plan.
Okay.
For some decisions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
So that will bring us up to the next agenda item, fiscal year 2028 budget goal discussion.
Yay!
Yes. It's September, so we're going to talk
Jean
budget
says
now.
Christmas in September.
Christmas is
So this was something we ID'd on your work plan. We put that together back in April, as kind of getting into this portion of your work here, kind of leading up to the budget discussions that you'll have, in most depth in January, but you'll receive from me, per the charter, a manager's draft budget around Thanksgiving or so, and have an overview of your first meeting in December and a dedicated review session with staff the first Saturday in December. So leading up to that, we really start work on this roughly over the summer with some brainstorming and ideas. And then I give our department heads direction about, working with Shirley, about the timeline for developing their draft operating capital budgets. Then Shirley and I receive them, sit down with everybody, go through them, and then we get a draft bottom line together, and then we work on that more for how we want to get it to go to the select board. So this takes a good 2.5 to 3 months to get the work product together that you receive in December. So we're kicking that off. I'll at our staff meeting tomorrow, I'll provide kind of the overview. So we'll end it up tonight. For you as a board, if you have some initial thoughts or policy direction, as I'm giving our department heads direction in their first pass of the budget. So the memo I've prepared for you this evening kind of goes through some recaps, some of the elements we discussed in the FY27 budget process, and just kind of some elements of where we are with how we budget, especially for folks who are newer to the board. So if depending with how the board like to approach, I can walk through the memo if you'd like. That'd be helpful.
Yeah.
So let's see. Cover that first part.
So our current operating budget in FY '27 is just over $17 million. A cent on our tax rate levies about $220,000 in new tax revenue. As you think about that pieces of the pie to balance our budget each year that has to be balanced at town meeting, just over half of it is tax revenue. Another, just over a quarter of that is local, around a quarter of that is local option tax revenue from sales rooms and meals and alcohol in town. And then the final 25% or so is fees levied by the town and other sources. And so in your work plan this year, we have a number of bulleted items in the memo that we're lining up the next couple of months for discussion. We'll be looking at local option tax revenue, looking at our capital budget structure, planning and strategy, looking at community facilities master planning as some capital elements, trying to project out some operating budget pressures and those projections in future years, dedicated discussions about funding for the Housing Trust and the Environmental Reserve Fund. And then I want to loop back to our fire training reserve fund that the voters approved last town meeting day, thinking about how that is funded as well.
Because I saw that, and I was like, didn't we do that already? I went back and looked.
We have the reserve, but we need a plan of how to put money in the reserve. So I'll start out as just kind of breaking out our operating budget as an overview here. No surprise, our services are for people, by people. The majority of our operating costs in town are town personnel, the staff who provide these services directly. It's about 2/3 of our overall operating budget is related to personnel costs in town. We use the consumer price index. We have a calculation benchmark we use to figure out our inflation factor that we utilize in a number of areas in the budget, especially our cost of living that's applied to staff, both unionized and non-unionized. That number in our last period that closed in June was 3.4%. We use that as our inflation benchmark. In addition, we've looked at building in a market factor for any merit pay increase for employees who are not covered by a bargaining unit. Our police contract is through June of 2028, so through this fiscal year that you'll be discussing. Our fire contract's been in process, and we hope to have that wrapped up sometime this fall. Another major component is the health insurance costs. We're seeing our rate increase appear to be probably in that 4 to 5% range entering the plan year. We have kind of the average with the Green Mountain Care Board that set those. We get what we call the placemat from our broker. It's just a big piece of paper. I'll call it the placemat. But we'll be working with those numbers. But I think the key takeaway for you is those costs have stabilized a bit as in recent years of the market. I think really thanks to the legislature for putting some further controls in our healthcare system to help with some cost escalation there. But that's certainly a major component of our overall cost as an employer.
So you're thinking 4 to 5% for the budget we're going to do next? Because it was like 5% last year.
Yeah, I think we're hearing around there. We don't have the exact number yet,
Yeah.
but we'll have that shortly. I'm going by the Green Mountain Care's kind of average rates, but I don't think we're going to see a double-digit increase from what I'm hearing right now. But if something changes, I'll let you know. So then I'll shift to debt service in our budget. So in our current fiscal year that we're in, this is going to see the maturing of debt for our police and fire station bond from 2006, 2007 mature. So that means it's going to be paid off. We're going to make a final debt payment on that of $65,000 in FY '27. So that will no longer be on the books as we go into FY '28 for this budget. So you have some retiring debt going into this budget. We've been chatting with the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank to discuss some possible debt structure options for the library project if it's approved by the voters. And just for folks who aren't familiar, the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank issues a debt pool in winter and summer. It pools municipal debt from municipalities and school districts in Vermont to package those bonds on the market. We don't typically in Vermont have bond ratings for municipalities or school districts using the pooled loan approach. So Moody's recently rating for the bond bank was an AA1 and AA2 rating for Moody's, which is very good for a bond rating. And I won't get too far into it, but as we're thinking about ways to structure this debt, if the library project proceeds, I think there's really a way to structure it over a couple fiscal years. we're likely looking at a calendar year 2028 construction for the project. So part of it is perhaps doing a winter bond series in that February, and then more of a summer bond series. Then you have a lag of a year where your first interest payment is due, and your principal payment's not due till the second year. So you kind of stagger these two bond series for the project, so you can step into the debt over a few budget cycles, so you don't have it all land at once. We don't necessarily need to take on all that cash and hold it at once. Other modeling that we'll look at with you in more depth as this project proceeds is you have options of the term, 20, 25, 30 years. Obviously, there's impact on interest for those. There's also, you can defer the principal up to 5 years. So there's different models and things to think about, but I'll bring that back to you if the project proceeds and think about the financing structure for it. But the takeaway here is there's ways to structure this debt so you have it in parts over a couple of years for when it hits the general fund. And then just other kind of debt things on the horizon. A reminder, we have a replacement ambulance being delivered in 2027. So this is something where we're seeing 3-year build times regularly for ambulance and the fire engine. The board had authorized me to proceed with a purchase order a few years ago to get our spot in line to get this ambulance built. Same with the fire engine. So that's before we need to have the financing approval to then get the cash to pay for it when it's delivered. So the plan talked about by the board is to have those debt notes for Town Meeting Day 2027 for the ambulance, and then the fire engine that will be delivered not until 2028 to look for those approvals from the voters coming up next March. But those payments on that debt is staggered too, because depending when it's delivered, then we'll need to get the debt, and then you have an interest payment the first year, and the principal lags a little bit. So we'll have this all kind of out in a schedule for you to follow a little easier, but there's opportunity to work in how you structure these things, how you want to structure your balance sheet. Ario Communications Tower is another capital project we've discussed quite a bit the last couple of years, where we're working on planning work in the short term on the technical pieces of that still. We'll have an update on that probably later this year or early next year, but I think it's going to take a little more project development time before that's ready for further consideration and discussion.
And that would be something that a potential public safety impact fee could be utilized for?
It's hard to say. Well, what we've looked at is there's an existing deficiency with the coverage, so that's where the challenge is, to try to have new dwelling units pay to remedy that existing deficiency.
Makes sense.
There may be an opportunity to leverage it if there's a need for components in like the basement of an apartment building, where that's a new development and they need it for good radio coverage. We have challenges there as well. Something like that could work there. So the debt schedule is included in the memo, just to give you a visual of what's currently on the books. So then I'll go with the capital budget. We've seen capital costs increase post-2020, costs for equipment driving a lot of that. As a reminder, in our equipment fund, the town has used what we call sinking funds for that. We try to take the useful life of the asset, figure out its replacement value, and then try to set aside an amount of money each year, so when it's time to replace it, we can pay cash for it. Doesn't always work. We have to try to evaluate these costs. Sometimes, as we're working with the budget, we try to defer parts of the payment for an asset that has a further time horizon for replacement, and try to sprinkle that along the life a little bit more if we're trying to save a little money in that current year in that capital budget. We just have to remember to circle back and reassess those assets every year. So that's what we do at the staff level coming up the next couple of months as we do that together.
And that's, Eric, we're going to spend a little more time on capital. I'm not sure how we work it into our time schedule, but really spend more time on that whole capital, those sheets that we look at and say, yeah, we need a police vehicle, but we don't look at it and say, well, it's 6 years from now and it's got a 6-year life.
Yeah, that was, I remember that from last budget cycle discussion, trying to get a good look at what's an appropriate replacement schedule if there's some needs for some modifications there.
And I pulled them all up over the weekend, just because we were having this discussion, and it's complex, because there's a lot of sheets in there that have zero. Like this, we know we're gonna need this, but we're not saving money for it.
Yeah.
And there's other ones that, where you see how much they've saved, is a little unclear to me how we got that. So it's, we probably should spend more than a half an hour looking at
Yes.
those 45 sheets.
Yeah, yeah, and I thought of, I had kind of a placeholder in October potentially, just to kind of talk about the overall structure a little bit, what's helpful from like a, from like a higher level summary component too. One thing I was looking at earlier this year is there's UMass Boston, they have a municipal service division, kind of MBA program, and they have consulting work, and they're branching out to more New England communities. So I was trying to, and one thing they do is help towns look at kind of how they do capital planning and capital budgeting. So I was looking into working with them. They didn't have capacity this year, but kind of from that conversation we had last budget cycle of, okay, we've done it this way for quite a while. Is there something we should be thinking about? There might be some other best practices or methodology to be thinking about. So that's something I'm hoping to do maybe next year, but in our discussion this fall, kind of taking a deeper dive into what all those elements of the capital plan look like.
Great.
And so that kind of leads into, we looked at the equipment fund, and that's what the next table is to remind you of the breakdown there. We've used for that different sources of funding. We've used fund balance for a number of years, been trying to draw that down, and my thought there had been only using fund balance when you're doing more of an infrequent replacement, or you have something up for replacement that has a gap to it. For example, the town hall server last year, we were like, okay, we're probably gonna need an extra $10,000 for that, let's use fund balance. Trying to get it to a point where the operating budget could really carry the bulk of those replacement costs year to year, so we're not having this fund balance for kind of that rolling stock replacement. Should the board want to go that direction, just kind of be thoughtful with it. We know our fund balance year to year is something we monitor, and how we want to appropriate that between capital projects and any buying down the tax rate. So try not to be carrying forward this ongoing plug with the fund balance for certain things. The highest has been police cruisers, was like $40,000 towards the total funding amount. So that's just to keep in mind. We've drawn that down for several years and trying to get to a point. I've worked with Shirley to try to spread these out more, so you're not having like, oh, this big bite of the apple is coming from fund balance. The only one remaining there is more of the police cruisers have that bigger bite. Bookmobile, we had a little bit more these next couple of years because it's due for replacement. There may be strategies now that we've established more of a development arm of the library with fundraising to also activate that to something great for bookmobile replacement. Infrequent replacement every 15 years or so. So trying to think of other strategies to fund these larger items.
I like it. Fund balance really should be, as we use it, the emergency cash, right? And so funding a replacement police cruiser is not an emergency. You know it's coming up. So I appreciate you moving us away from that and just using it for, we saved for 8 years and we're short by 20,000. Well, we have a fund balance. And it also kind of separates it out, so we can just clarify when we're applying fund balance, it's a tax implication, reduction implication, as opposed to, oh, but is that the money we're using for the fire truck, or is that the money we're using for the taxes? So,
Yeah. Yeah, I think the other thing I'll just flag too is we think about things like ambulance replacements. We've typically borrowed for those. They're $500,000 or so for each one. So maybe there's some strategies there for starting to save something towards those, so we don't need to be financing them. Also think about ways to reinvest revenue. We have to look at it closer, but I'll just flag it. We pay cash for the other assets that are under. We pay cash for dump trucks. They're getting up there too, over 200,000. But just a note on that. I don't have a solution for it right now.
And ongoing conversations about and looks at the revenue generated from our ambulance service, that would be something to look at longer term, because, we are trying to look at that and what we can, utilize that money for, so,
Then my final section here is just on our overall operation. So each department works with Shirley and her team on, nuts and bolts of operations. Think fuel that goes in the tanks, electricity, supplies, utility costs, that type of thing, to provide services, what that all looks like. I don't have a sense of any items to flag besides just kind of the global conversation around oil and what that means for fuel prices, and try to project that out the best that we can. I'll review the operational needs of each department every year, understanding where that capacities are being pushed a bit, and demand is, and understanding we don't have a lot of space to always grow that in a manner. It has to be really thoughtful and spread out, just where we are from a taxation and budget standpoint. And I want to give my plug for just continue to think about lean operations and technology integration, modernization elements. We added the planning permit software in this current budget. I know they've been talking with vendors and hopefully try to roll that out in the coming months here, getting that set. There's a number of areas to look at for us operationally that are still just manual and paper. So I'd like to bring to the board an action plan for some key elements, be thinking about the next few budget cycles of how to address that. So I think we'll free up staff time to then in turn be able to help address some of these other operational things that we're having. But there will be a cost to it. We can learn from a lot of our partners, peers in the municipal area of how they've approached it. But it's something to just be aware of. We still have a lot of processes that are manual here. And that is my overview. So if you have, as a board, any direction for me this meeting, I will build that into my development here.
Anybody like to direct Eric?
Brenda wants to, though. Because she's the new finance.
Dana, we're coming for you. No, I mean, I think mostly, looking at the kind of the insecurity at a federal level and a global level. I think that we, my goal is to have as lean a budget as we can, that's why we discussed, looking at, again, some of the capital and some of the longer term things to plan for. What I assume will be inevitably many years of what we need to be lean budgets, based on what we're seeing. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's really my only guidance, would be to look at that and to look at some of the longer term housing trust and ERF funding options. I really, do think that we need to figure out a way to perpetually fund those. That's, and in the ERF's case, a bit cleaner than having people vote every year. I mean, it's better that the money goes in there than it doesn't, so if that's the easiest mechanism, then that's fine, but,
Yeah, I don't see myself being comfortable bringing anything tax increase to the voters that's above the inflation rate. Now, if that means, voters look at budgets. They're dealing with their home budgets. We're dealing with our home budget. But I also know that we have staff who are expecting to be compensated. And those contracts are already in place. And so I don't know that I can say right off the top of my head what I would cut, except for look at scrubbing the capital. No budgets, services we provide the town today that I would cut in order to afford our police and fire. But with that said, a lean budget, if we have to dip into other funding sources or move some capital out or something in order to get it to an affordable tax base, would be my goal.
Yeah, I'm really in favor of modernizing systems where we can, increasing capacity, in ways that makes everyone's lives easier and be able to do more with what we have, and learning from our peer municipalities who, no need to reinvent the wheel. A lot of the solutions exist around us.
Yeah, this will be my first budget that I'll be participating in, so I feel I know. Well, I feel very lucky to be part of this select board and to be working with such competent people, so I'm looking forward to it.
That's the first time I've ever heard someone, except for Jean, say she's looking for budgets, so.
I think you're looking forward to it, Greta. Converting the board. We're all going to be numbers people. But maybe Ted.
Big ideas.
Big historical.
No, it's helpful, I appreciate it. It's hard to put it's too early to put a number necessarily to something, but I think my messaging is, lean means try to tighten up.
Unless you can think of a new revenue source or something else you can take out of your budget. I see a lot of ads.
All right, we will get to work. We'll sharpen the pencils and get the calculators.
Shirley's back there taking notes.
Put some adding machine tape into the budget.
So that would bring us to manager's report.
Yeah, so the board had asked about some outreach for the library bond vote with a postcard, so I've been working with a vendor on getting that set up. We're going to wrap that up this week. We've been able to get our voter checklist, thanks to Sarah, to just scrub it so we have one going per household, so we're not sending 3 postcards per se. So we're working to get that to the printer by the end of this week. Our plan is to have those mailed out the week of the 14th, so hopefully folks can receive those in advance of their ballot. We think the ballots might come towards, it's hard to say, late the week of the 21st or so. I think they have to be received at least, I don't want to say it wrong, but they should be hopefully delivered by end of September. Secretary of State's office is mailing all these out. It's the state's general election. The board, by taking the action it did to warn this and get it on the ballot in August, there will be the question for the bond on that ballot that's mailed out. So, I think we're getting about 60 cents per postcard. I didn't see our final number of households, but I think this might be in the $3,000 range or so. We're working on that right now. I share with you our local option tax report that came in to close out FY26. It was good news. Our revenue was about $120,000 over the budgeted amount, so that's good. We saw in the second half of that year the greater split for the local share of the local option tax revenue come in, so from an 80-20 to a 75-25 split. Did I say that? No, 75-25 to 80-20. We're retaining more money. So we will continue to look at that. I've been trying to see if we can get some modeling with an economist to help us think through that a little bit in the budget process. They've just been a bit busy, so I'm hoping I might be able to get some assistance on trying to project that. But we try to look at prior years, we try to build trends, we try to be really conservative with it year to year the best that we can. Our rooms and meals tax has certainly taken a climb. It's a testament to hotels and new restaurants that have been opening in town. So that's helped where there's some lower sales tax quarters. But overall, the town brought in over $4.3 million in that local option sales tax. 25% of our operating revenue buys down the tax rate about 20 cents, which for a median home is around $600 a year. So it's a real value to the overall structure of our tax rate in town.
Just a little bit, just because I'm thinking about it, but I had kind of thrown out that maybe we establish a process where we fund the housing trust fund with a percentage of the rooms and meals tax when it's over budget. So the fact is we do know that number now. It's not like we have to wait for 6 months for the audit to end before we can decide. We could know, if we were to do something like that, you would know that number before the budget season started. So that'd be
Yeah, you could look at that. And one thing we've also tried to look at too is when the audit closes to what the unassigned fund balance is. And if that revenue surplus in that one area, that could influence where the fund balance is. So just, so the board can take that under consideration as well. If you want that to help with that number, if you have a benchmark you want to meet there too. We'll have our 9/11 remembrance survey, not survey, ceremony, I'm sorry. It's the reading here. Our remembrance ceremony for 9/11 coming up on Friday, September 11th at our fire station. It's a community event. Welcome to have the public to come to our fire station for our remembrance of that day. And it's 25 years since 2001 when that occurred. So I was thinking about that the other day. So certainly thanks to our public safety staff and everyone who makes that possible each year. Williston's held a remembrance every year for several years. So that's a good event every year. Our firefighter recruits, Dunlap and Thomas, completed their 8-week recruit academy on August 21st. We honored them with a graduation ceremony and lunch at the station. I want to thank our staff and our neighboring departments who assist in the training effort, and our new battalion chief of training and safety, Will Moran, who wrapped up his first academy in his new role with the town. So it was a really nice ceremony. Thanks, Chief Coletto does a great job planning that with his team. So it's great to be a part of that day. And then I can't recall if I shared this or not, but our UPWP for the active transportation plan was funded by the CCRPC. So that will be moving forward. The planning staff is working with a consulting contract on that right now. We'll have more of a plan for what that looks like over the next year for that active transportation plan. So I'll update the board on what that looks like. And there's a water quality week coming up in mid-September where they'll be giving tours of the wastewater plant. I'll share that invitation from the superintendent, Chelsea Manning, over there. All select board is welcome to attend if you want. I'll share that.
That's one of the best tours that we have. Seriously,
I still talk about it.
I've been twice. This is cool. It's a little gross, but it's mostly cool. The actual water treatment place in Burlington, that's still that, and the 10-speed bike that winds the town clock.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just
we
let me
talked
know.
about,
All these years, I haven't seen you.
You can wind the clocks in it.
I paid
The
it.
town works.
I paid to do that.
But that's all I have for the report.
Okay. So that brings us to other business.
And actually, I'll just circulate for signature the code of ethics ordinance that passed last meeting. We just have a series of catering permits here. We have a wedding, a manufacturer special event for a wine tasting at Isham's. Or actually, this is the one. Ted gave me authorization to approve this the other day because it was a short notice. So that occurred, that went fine. There's a wedding at Isham's on September 19th, Bevo. Yep, Bevo's been approved one. The Vermont Repertory Theater Company is going to be holding events in October 15th to 17th and 22nd to 24th on Commerce Street, similar to, I believe, what was held up at Isham's earlier this year.
let's separate the votes and do the Isham and the VRT one separately?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll move
Those are
to,
the only ones.
move to approve the catering permit at Isham Farm.
Second. Sorry, I should have asked. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There are no nays.
I'll move to approve the catering permits for the Vermont Repertory Theater.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There are no
I'll abstain.
Oh, one abstain.
We have warrants that we get all the way around, so we don't leave things on.
Okay.
McHugh, are you bogarting the?
Which one was the next one?
No, you have the.
Oh, I have it, yeah, I have it, yeah.
That's it for
That's it, okay.
So that brings us to final thoughts on agenda items from this meeting. Are there any?
What's the process for getting back to our community on roads?
Yeah, I was.
And by the way, Eric, I appreciate the fact that you got that meeting pulled together, and they seem like it was really great, communication. I thought you did a great job getting that done and making everybody happy, but they're still looking for an answer.
Yeah, the thing is, that if we put it on the agenda without anything,
No, you can't, yeah,
concrete.
yeah, right. So the question is when, I don't need an answer tonight, but we should probably be able to say when we think we could have something concrete they're looking for.
Yep.
I think part of the question is the ask and the staff work that goes with the ask, and not all of it may be something that staff can do. So I can think about it a little bit more, but, you know, that type of, how detailed of a report out and what the timeline looks like for that, and what's the select board looking for with that request. I can talk to the chair about what that discussion can look like, but I know if there's analysis that needs to be done on some of these items, we need some more data in some spots, at least we're going to work on that. But the other thing that's kind of pending is the old Creamery Road UPWP study that I think should be wrapped up this fall, so that, you know, in that section of town, that's something that's been examined pretty in depth this year. So I think I'm trying to get a little more sense from the group, kind of what, you know, they're kind of looking at, you know, priority matrix maybe, and that's where we're kind of focused on some Oak Hill Road enforcement and education. But I think that just from a staff standpoint, kind of what the work product looks like, just thinking about how to prioritize that within your work plan if you want to make an amendment. It's unclear.
And as I think about it, it might make sense to put something on maybe 2 meetings from now where we could have somebody, chief or somebody from law enforcement to come in and talk about what they can do, and then just give a status update on what steps have been investigated and where they stand. That will at least give transparency.
Yeah, that we are really honestly working on it,
Yeah.
not just hoping that we get time in the spring to think about it again. And I do think that there's probably has to be sort of some action in parallel with further study on further action, because as we already seen, you can get out there and start doing more enforcement right now, right? So, but that, and maybe there's 1 or 2 steps in between that we can start doing while we figure out the priority and favor ones. But I think they're looking for action, not status. And I think the reality is you probably still need to do some studies. We still need to gather data and make sure everything's there, but maybe not wait for all that to be complete before we start taking any action. That makes sense.
Okay. Other items from tonight? Hearing none, then I declare that we are adjourned.